Good.
I'll just say he's an expert in agriculture.
Shannon, good morning.
Thank you, Abraham. And it's a pleasure to be here. Can everybody hear me? Is this working? Yep. Perfect. Sounds good. We're off to a good start then. It's a little bit, I want to spend some time today talking about what AURI is, what we're doing in the ag bioscience area, and then talk about some of the initiatives, projects underway. And then I think the most exciting part of my talk today is I'm going to turn it over to an entrepreneur who's very active in this space to give you some ideas as to what he's doing in ag bioscience and what's happening here in the state of Minnesota. So to start out, just a little bit about AURI. Who's heard of AURI in the past? All right, I've got a great crowd here. So AURI, I learned about AURI probably about 9 months ago. I spent my first 14 years working in the wheat industry. Came back to Minnesota, learned about AURI, and thought, wow, this is a pretty exciting organization, a great group, a great mission. And really AURI's focus is on value-added agriculture. What can we do to improve utilization, improve farm gate prices, create jobs, retain jobs here in the state of Minnesota, and help take those ideas that entrepreneurs have in the innovative space and help move them forward to reality. So our mission statement, we just changed it within the last 2 months. Really simplified it as to what AURI is. And we are here to foster long-term economic benefit for Minnesota through value-added agricultural products. We do that through technical assistance mainly. We've got laboratories across the state that work with entrepreneurs to help them get over those technical hurdles or technical humps that they might have and proof of concept and scale up and product development. We also provide some financial assistance on a cost-sharing basis when needed, but that's a much smaller part of our organization. We are open to helping anyone in the state of Minnesota. So any entrepreneur, any individual that has a business idea in the agriculture space, we are willing to talk to you, see about the feasibility of your idea, and see how we can help you move that forward. We do this across the state. This is just a map of some of the clients that we've worked with. We work with both clients and we also work on initiatives. So we go out and talk to the industry, talk to our stakeholders, see where there's some information gaps in the industry, and then create some initiatives to see how can we assist, how can we get those ideas started, get that information to move those ideas forward again. We've got several AURI staff in attendance. You'll hear from a few of them later. Harold Stanislawski, Rod Larkins, and also my chairman, for AURI is from this area. He lives about 6 to 7 miles here from Worthington, Ron Obermoller, and he is right back here in the corner as well. So you're seeing a lot of AURI folks this morning. We work in 4 focus areas. The 4 focus areas are bio-based products. So work on what can we do to replace petrochemical use, for example, with bio products. We do a lot in coal products. Coal products is probably one of the more difficult ones to explain. But it's really looking at those secondary streams from the agriculture processing. How can we find value, additional uses for those side products or byproducts from the main processing stream? Food is probably our biggest growth area that we've seen with the local food movement, the food entrepreneurism that's happening here in the state. Today, probably 60% of our client projects that come to us are in the food area. And that's just grown tremendously in the last few years. And it's an area of time and energy that we're spending a lot more to help those food projects and food ideas move into the commercial space. Whether that be through ingredient and formulation, product development, scale up, and a lot of work actually on shelf life stability to move from maybe a few days to several months so that they have a viable product on the commercial market. And then finally, renewable energy, which is now no surprise to anyone in this room. AURI's roots, I think, started with renewable energy and the ethanol birth that happened during the time that AURI was created. So I want to spend a little bit on the ag bioscience space and what we've done, some of the research that we've worked on. But I think it was mentioned yesterday that agriculture is so much more than production and ag bioscience. And I look at my roots of growing up on a farm in southeast North Dakota. I remember it was the farm life was fantastic, and you learned a lot in that space. But I've been exposed to so much over my last 16 years of work that it's so much more, and it's such an exciting area to be in. And I think all of you feel that same passion for agriculture in terms of just the possibilities from precision ag that we heard about yesterday to vaccines, and we'll hear about some of the ideas from Dave later on, what he's working on. To me, it's just such an exciting space, and AURI and our role that we have in this to help see those new ideas that are coming out in the marketplace and have the potential. It's a really fun job, and I think that Minnesota, creating AURI several years ago, it was such a great vision to think about what can be done for utilization and to look at the innovative base that exists here in Minnesota. So a little bit of my presentation today will be talking about some of these current and past perspectives, ideas on next steps, and some of the initiatives underway in this ag bioscience space. And then, of course, we'll hear from Garden Fresh and Wind Farm with Dave. And a few of the resources I'm going to use today are the Battelle Memorial Institute study that was done for Minnesota Ag Bioscience. Who's heard of the Battelle? Great. I've got another great audience, so if we have questions, I can refer to you guys, right? This was a very in-depth study done on ag bioscience in the state of Minnesota. It was done in 2013. AURI, Minnesota Corn, Minnesota Soybeans supported that study to look at what are opportunities, what's happened, and what are the opportunities in ag bioscience. Then the University of Minnesota Extension did an economic impact analysis to look at how is this sector impacting jobs and economic activity and some of the other affected industries across the state of Minnesota, and that was sponsored by the Initiative Foundations across the state. So starting out, I think Minnesota has a great base to work from on ag bioscience. This is just the marketing value of production here in Minnesota. Probably no surprise to anybody in this room to see the growth and what happened from 2008 as prices went forward. We look at roughly a 5-year average of $20 billion of agriculture production value here for the state of Minnesota. And it's also very diversified as I look at Minnesota. We have, I would say, roughly a 50-50 split today in terms of livestock and crops. So there's a lot of raw material to work with to add value to move into the marketplace. Does that look right, Ron, and from a farmer's perspective? Yeah. When we look at some of the work that was done on ag bioscience from the impact study, we can see some of the segments that really rise to the top in terms of where Minnesota is active in and where some of the cores are. Probably no surprise to anybody, food products and food production by far is above and beyond the biggest sector that is really contributing in this space. Chemicals, also we can see in the southwest corner here, food products and chemicals by far the two major cores of ag bioscience. We move to the north, we've got wood and paper that start to stand out, and then you can see, again, food products is prevalent across the state. And as we look at direct contribution, $16 billion in output from ag bioscience and 23,000 jobs roughly, and this is just for greater Minnesota. So those all the counties outside of the 7-county metro area. Overall for Minnesota, if we look at just economic output from beyond the direct contributions, roughly $23.4 billion, 64,000 jobs. That's about 10% of the greater Minnesota economy that's impacted as an output from ag bioscience. And then there's also an impact in the metro area. When you look at job-supported marketing, corporate headquarters, management, those types of areas of ag bioscience, a pretty big impact in the metro area as well. So just looking at greater Minnesota, some of the other impacts here by industry. So we look at beyond the direct impact and more the affected industries, wholesale trade just rises to the top in terms of those companies that are providing supplies but not directly to the consumer, right? Packaging and moving them to where they're needed within that value chain in the supply chain. Dairy, cattle, and milk production. Again, probably no surprise when we look at the cheese manufacturing, the dairy, the fluid milk market in the States. Electrical power, sugar beet farming rises to the top in many areas. And I know it was mentioned yesterday, the housing markets. In terms of that's more of an induced outcome from the model that was done by the University of Minnesota. If we look at more of a focused breakdown of ag bioscience in southwest Minnesota, food manufacturing again rises to the top. What would be the food manufacturing here in southwest Minnesota? Odds? What's that? Turkeys, yeah. Beef manufacturing as well, right? cheese manufacturing as well as a big part of this, and wet corn milling were the factors that were listed for Southwest Minnesota. Chemicals is a little misleading maybe, but that really is the biofuels side of the equation here. And then we have direct impacts really from ag bioscience into the farm supplies, sugar beet manufacturing, ethanol, wet corn milling, and cheese manufacturing were the findings from the University of Minnesota study. Again, if we look at this on more of an affected industry side, we see sugar beet farming rising to the top, wholesale trade again, transport by truck, food services, and so on down the line. I know there was discussion yesterday on maintenance and repair, and just the need for that service as well for servicing the industries here in Southwest Minnesota. When we look at it on a dollar output, the other was on jobs. Again, sugar beets and wholesale trade just rise to the top in terms of those other industries that are affected from the ag bioscience sector. Looking at this in terms of what Battelle did and looking at what are some of the core competencies in Minnesota that provide opportunities for this ag bioscience space. And they looked at, they uncovered 14 core competencies, broke those into 4 platforms of options and alternatives that Minnesota should consider as growth areas in the ag bioscience here. And you can see that these circles, they're not perfect circles in terms of, it's very specific in terms of what a platform is. You can see a lot of overlap when we look at the 4 different platforms. And so that makes it a little hard to bring those numbers together in terms of creating an overall, but it also looks at just how things are interconnected when we start thinking about the ag bioscience space. And I'll talk about these in a little bit more detail. When we talk about the microbial ag bioscience, we're talking really about some of the discussions we had last night, right around AI and around infectious disease, vaccines, biosecurity, crop protection, things like that are really important as inputs to provide just that adequate food supply. Those inputs that are needed to fight disease, to fight pests, to fight weeds, all of that space and that energy. When we talk about resilient and efficient productive agricultural systems, we're talking about biofuels, the biochemicals, yield improvements, the research and development that goes into that, fertilizer manufacturing, soil preservation, really to sum it up, sustainably growing and feeding the world population falls into this category. But you look at a system-wide approach as well. It starts from the inputs all the way through to the outputs as well. And then you've got the bio-based industrial products, a pretty easy one to explain in terms of biofuels, biomass, biomaterials, anything bio, right, that in agriculture that is being worked on in Minnesota has a lot of expertise and a role here with biodiesel, with biofuels, with ethanol, with some of the bio-based manufacturing that's occurring across the state as well. And then we look at value-added food and health. And we looked earlier that food processing is a key component of what's happening in ag bioscience. But you've also got this opportunity for nutritional supplements, or how do we add value to today's food supply? And that is seen as a potential growth area in terms of how can we add value to what we're already doing in food manufacturing, what we're doing very well in the state of Minnesota in food manufacturing and animal feed as well. So that's very quickly just a quick description of those platforms that were identified, some of the core areas for Minnesota to consider as we look at an ag bioscience strategy. But then we also want to talk about what are some of the advantages that are happening here already. What's this base that exists in Minnesota to really try and move forward on ag bioscience? We look at global corporate leaders. You know, it's amazing to me the size of some of the companies and the impact that some of the companies here in Minnesota have. I was aware of many of them from my past roles in industry, but when I moved to Minnesota and started meeting many more people and just networking, what I would call the number of second-tier companies are those $1 billion to $5 billion companies that exist in the state that I wasn't aware of before. There's just so much happening here in terms of the agriculture space that we've got great global corporate leaders to really put a vision out there and get behind it and try to move things forward. We've got small business and active entrepreneurs across the state. I don't think it's any surprise here, and it's a role that AURI is very active in terms of working with those entrepreneurs and those innovative individuals in agriculture It's just a really vibrant base in terms of ideas coming forward. And I think it was mentioned yesterday on the intellectual property and patent positions that Minnesota is a leader in this area. And that definitely comes through from our work at AURI and the people that we meet as well. You've got the university efforts, University of Minnesota, MINSCU, that are just great, top-notch in terms of research and applying that research to get it moved forward and for us to have discussions. I think the University of Minnesota was just ranked as one of the top agriculture universities as well. You've got regional facilities and efforts like here in Worthington, Mankato, we were having discussions last night, Wilmer with Midwest. There's just a lot happening here in the state. And you've got, I would say, quite a few efforts underway in terms of trying to pull pieces together. You've got the Grow North effort happening, and that is getting some legs as a single point of entry for entrepreneurs into the food space. You've got the Minnesota Cup and the Clean Tech competitions as incubators to help move ideas forward. Dave, who you'll hear from next, is a winner of both the Minnesota Cup and Clean Tech. You've got the Minnesota Department of Agriculture programs and the DEAN programs that we heard about yesterday that are trying to help move these ideas forward. You've got the initiative foundations that are active in the space. And I know that AURI just received a Smith grant to work on food networks and to try to move that discussion forward in those clusters and networking conversations that are so critical at moving ideas forward. Of course, you've got AURI and there's many other organizations that are active in this area. And it's, as you start looking at all of these different activities that are happening, it's exciting to see what the opportunities are and how do we align that and harness that energy and really move it forward. Labor specialization is another key area that was brought up by Bethel. A 1 would be the index in terms of you're kind of at the national average in terms of specialization. When we look at food processing in Minnesota, we're at 1.31. So very specialized in terms of the expertise and the knowledge that exists here in the state to do something in that value-added food area because we have that intellectual knowledge and capacity here in Minnesota. And there's several initiatives underway, even without a full overarching strategy, I would say that are really getting started and maybe starting to get some legs here as well. You've got the protein highway discussions happening. I'm not sure how many people have heard of this. It was launched by an idea by the Consulate of Canada, and they're looking at how can we brand the Western Canadian provinces and the Midwest region states to make them a protein hub. Basically, we look at what's happening here with soybeans, with other protein crops, with peas and lentils and pulses in Canada, and it's just you look at the demand for protein and diets around the world and the growing population, and how can you brand this area as being a protein supplier to the world? And those discussions are really getting started and getting moving. A lot of buy-in and discussions. Rob Larkins was at the meeting that the consulate pulled together a few months ago, and it's we look at it as well as in terms of processing and protein ingredients and what that can mean for capital investment into the state of Minnesota. You've got the Grow North that I already mentioned. Greater MSP is an organization that we talk to on a regular basis that is a lot of the corporate heads in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, and they're focused on food and water. And how does that tie in, of course, to the work that we're doing in value-added agriculture and just this ag bioscience space, and having that group at the table to have these discussions and create a strategy about how do we all fit together. Food networks that are underway. I mentioned the Smith grant that AURI has on having more food interactions with food entrepreneurs. We already do this through an industry thought leaders group where we pull together a lot of the key food experts and subject matter experts and have conversations with them about what's happening in food and how can we better prepare entrepreneurs and businesses for things that they're seeing in the food space. The Forever Green work by the University of Minnesota. You look at cover crops and relay crops and what does that mean in terms of additional value to greater Minnesota. What do perennial crops mean? What does pennycress or camelina? And just how does that contribute to just more economic activity in terms of not just being a cover crop, but is there a value to some of those crops or relay crops? And that's where AURI is getting involved to see are there potentials instead of just growing a cover crop, is there something that can be harvested and have a value add into the ag bioscience space? And just in December, AURI worked to start an ag capital working group. And those discussions have been pretty fascinating to me in terms of how can we work together and create those networks that were discussed I think yesterday by Deed as well, in terms of how do we make sure that people are aware of all these different programs and discussions. And I thought the first meeting would be just a handful of people. We had about 20 people show up to talk about just how do we connect people to the funds that are available, what do we need to do, how do we make sure that that information is getting across as well. Indeed, as part of those conversations, NBA, and then several of the venture capitalists and angel fund groups as well. And I think that one has a lot of potential in terms of making those connections. So in terms of future efforts, we continue to have a lot of discussions with the major players to look at what can we do to help move this ag bioscience space forward in the entrepreneurial ecosystem. How can we continue to look at funding and risk capital that's so vital to moving ideas forward in the ag bioscience space? What can we do more on networks? We have an innovation networking program at AURI that really is trying to look at this, and you read a lot of the literature from different groups, and networking is such a key part of success in many ways in terms of getting those ideas forward. How do we develop and attract talent? Great discussion yesterday on this in terms of programs and innovative ideas that are happening here in Minnesota to develop that talent, and how do we attract talent with housing and different things that were being discussed as well. Policies and programs supporting innovation that were touched on yesterday. So a lot of the things that you've already heard about that I get to talk a little bit more here on, but I think they're all critical pieces in terms of moving the space forward. So it's a big and exciting area. It is, discussions that are underway is so much more than one organization to take on, and it's going to take a lot of collaboration and partnership to really let these blossom and move forward. And there's already initiatives and efforts underway in the space, which I think is great to see that progress already happening. But I'm going to stop there and turn it over to Dave Roser. And Dave is an entrepreneur in Minnesota. He's been active. He's got a lot of great ideas. He's going to share a few of those ideas with you in terms of where he's looking at for opportunities, some of his successes that he's had, and some ideas that he'll share with you in terms of where he's going on some other entrepreneurial ideas. So it's a great hands-on fix of ag bioscience, and I'm pleased to introduce Dave.
Thank you. I'm the youngest of five, so I can shout while I chew. Go ahead. Anyway, my name is Dave Roser, and I want to tell you about two exciting companies that I'm involved with in founding. The first one, I'm going to give it to you in chronological order. The first one is Garfish Farms, and as was stated earlier, we won the Minnesota Cup in our division and the Clean Tech Open Sustainability Award, and then we went on to California, won the National Award for Clean Tech Open. We won several others, the Eureka Award, and a few others along the way. And what we've been doing for the last 6 years, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the Garfish Farms. What we're doing is we're growing food indoors. And so I'll start with, I had a problem. My problem was I had an empty building that I owned. And I was trying to figure out how to build this in the economy, I think about 6 years ago. And so I thought, well, I'll just start another business. And so that's what I wound up doing. And I was looking for something green and natural and fresh. And so that's how I came along with the idea of Garfish Farm. So what happened along the way is that I'm actually not trained in agriculture. As a matter of fact, the professors who've been to our warehouse have said, gee, you really are thinking outside the box. And I remind them that I grew up in the city of Chicago, so I didn't know what the box looked like to begin with. So what I saw, I've been looking at this more from a CPA accountant type of view. That's my vast training. So I've been looking at farms that were indoors, single layer, and that just what's going to cut it, doing that in greenhouses in a northern climate. Then we see what's happening with stacked hydroponics. That's a little older slide. They look a little more high tech, but you still have you've solved some of the density problems, but you haven't solved all of the energy problems. So what we did is we came up with something, and we call this piece the orbiting garden. What we did is we took 4 shelves, basically, curved them, put them on a orbiting drum. And what happens is the plants are actually growing inside towards the light. The roots are to the outside, and in the bottom is a pan of nutrient solution. And so these plants are going around very slowly. It takes about a half hour to get all the way around. The reason we do that is that certain plants care about gravity, and certain plants don't. And the ones that do are in the orbiting garden. We try to, it takes plants about 15 minutes to figure if they're not on the right side up. And so what we do is it takes, by the time they're thinking they're one way, they're another way. So we have come up with this way of growing plants very densely. And what this has the advantage over the stacked hydroponic method is that for every 4 shelves, you now have 1 light fixture. And because of the space, we can stack 2 on top of each other. The other issue is that when you're growing a plant here and you have a light here, because you got to leave some room for the plant to grow, and what happens is when the plant's very young, you're losing all this value of the light, because you lose 75% of the value of the light every foot you drop. So that's the 2 big hurdles in indoor growing, is the space density and then the energy use. And so we think we've accomplished that, or that's what we've been proving. You can see there's one of the orbiting gardens, that's the one in our Maplewood facility. The gentleman on the far end down there is actually my son. He's about the same size I am, to give you an idea of the scale. There's actually 20 drones in that. And the little dark spots there are the actual roots sticking out. And then you can see in the middle, we have progressed along our St. Paul farm facility. We've now, you can see a PLC screen. Everything is controlled, all of the lights, the water, everything. It can call us on our cell phone and tell us that there's something wrong. So we've really been changing the landscape here. And part of that with that landscape is the density. So we can grow in basically a 1 acre building, we can grow about as much as 100 acres of cropland. And that's because we're vertical and we're all year round. And so that's what's very important. Also, the other issue is the amount of water that we use. It's greatly reduced, especially when you're talking about irrigated crops in some places like the high desert. So that's what we're doing. We just go on, I'll show you a little bit more. We also have a vertical system. It's actually more like it's a overhead conveyor system. So it's kind of like an assembly line for food. These panels move down the warehouse and grow food. We harvest them every day. And what I want to show you, the picture on the bottom right there is a project that we're working on that it's supposed to be funded in June. It's what we call a 3P, a public-private partnership. And this one's going to be in New England, and that's actually that is the actual what's going to be built over there. And what we're doing there is we've got the landlord who has an old building, would like to get that used again. We have the state that's very interested in job creation and healthy food access. And we have a nonprofit agency that's been charged with doing job training and Meals on Wheels and a whole bunch of other things for the state. We also have the county and the city are very much involved too. So they're all involved in getting this done. And so what we'll be doing is building a Garden Fresh farm in New England. And in this particular area, there are 30 million people within a 100-mile radius of this farm. So that gives you the idea, we'll just be scratching the surface of what we're going to be growing for that area. And then there'll be job training because there's going to be a lot more indoor agricultural jobs in the future. And so there'll be job training as that expands in that area. So that's what we're doing there. Also, funny little thing that happened on the way to the farm. I've always been looking for ways to increase the CO2 content inside a building. And we've looked at a lot of different ways. The easiest way is you can go on eBay and buy a CO2 generator. They're unregulated. You can just hang one up and create all the CO2 you want. That actually seemed intuitive to what we were doing. And so we were looking for other methods, from growing mushrooms to actually worms and things like that, fish, things like that. And what we discovered is that there's a couple of things that really fit well together. And I'm going to regress for a second and say our St. Paul farm is in the middle of a lot of people. But the problem is getting the food that last mile to the consumer. That's the difficult part. And so, for instance, for us to do Whole Foods, we would have to ship from our St. Paul location to Munster, Indiana. to their distribution center and would turn around and come back and get into all their stores. So again, that doesn't seem to make sense, but that is what the world that we live in as far as distribution. So when you look at it, I need CO2, and I should really be near the distribution centers. Where are all the distribution centers? They're in rural areas, right, near an interstate. And what else happens to be there that has a lot of CO2? Well, there's a lot of ethanol plants around here. There's a lot of issues starting to come up with that, and so we just started to talk about that in the last few weeks with a lot of interest in this state, Wisconsin, Iowa, about us, because we can build a farm anywhere. So we put a farm next to a ethanol plant and basically sequester, take all of that CO2, instead of taking it and pumping it into the ground or something like that, we actually turn it into something useful. We can increase the CO2 value inside our farms, we increase the production of the weight of the product as it's moving through here. So it's a win-win all the way around. So we're exploring some ways to be able to do that. We're basically a pole barn, a large one, they say 45,000 square feet. With our equipment, we create about 25 jobs in the area, and these would be full-time, year-round agricultural jobs. And so it would be there, it would actually scrub the air. So it's simple chemistry. You've got the plants are made out of carbon, so they take the seed and they release the O2. And so that's what we are looking to do and put more of these out in the rural area. The other issue then is then it can get to a distribution hub. Hy-Vee is they have a hub not too far from here. Target's hub is in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Mankato has a brand new one for Walmart. So you can see these are in rural areas, and if we can harvest in the morning, get the product to the DC in that afternoon, it'll flow right through, it'll be on the trucks, it's in the store the next day. So it's basically 24 hours fresh. So now you look at it really reduces transportation, you really reduce the amount of spoilage, you've increased the nutritional value of that product because it's fresher, and also when you take it home, it lasts in your refrigerator a little bit longer than the things that were shipped 2,000 miles away. This is what we grow. Okay? We don't grow corn or soybeans or sugar beets or anything like that. None of that's going to work. Some of those things kind of look weird when you grow them hydroponically. We grow high-value items that spoil quickly, and so we have a complete line of herbs. And so if you go to a Kowalski's or a Lund's, we just started with Lund's here this week. You'll see these on the pegs, and so we love doing this business. And as I was explained, this is really how we've had to reinvent the food distribution area for us, is that instead of going 2,000 miles all the way to the market, we're basically going right to the distribution center and to the customer. So I'll just quickly go through this. This is our business model, and I didn't know that there was a name for this, but a sustainable compass. I found this out as we were going through the Clean Tech Open. This was just, when we put the business model together, this made a lot of sense. This is you want everybody to love your company or love some part of your company. And so we have the environmental aspects of the company, that people that are concerned about that, the water use, the land use and such. We have the economic use. You've got an old building now it's going to be paying rent. The taxes go up. It's now everybody. So when you're in there, you've got a return on investment in a farm. So to maybe pay for that CO2 sequestering unit that we just put there. So those are all important. You've got the job creation that's going to be there. The access to healthy food is part of that, because, and I won't get into this, but we do incorporate a CSA program food hub with our farms as well. And in doing that, we embrace other local farmers, and we bring things in, we buy from them, and then we actually have a CSA that runs all year round. We're, I think, the only ones in Minnesota that do that. So, and then, of course, the consumer is looking for, they want something local. It's actually, they want something local more than they want it organic, because they don't understand organic anymore. And so it's local and it's no pesticide, because we're growing it inside. And that's what people want. And the other thing is we're competitively priced. So our price, you'll see ours hanging on the peg, and they're selling for the same price as the products coming from California. So you're not paying like $1 premium for that basil that you might see in other places. And so that's in a nutshell about Garden Fresh Farm. So why Mint Farm? What's Mint Farm doing? Well, it's kind of, marketing 101, what do you do and improve uses for your equipment and things like that. And this, it's actually kind of, started kind of strangely about 2 years ago when, a year and a half, the state was starting to look into the legalization of growing cannabis. And one of the TV stations in town decided that Garden Fresh Farms would be a perfect partner to do this. Of course, they didn't ask me. And so they came over, I happened to be out of town, they came over with their film crew and they filmed us, our entryway and all that. All of a sudden the phone starts ringing and I get all these people interested in partnering us to grow cannabis inside. And after a long, hard look and talking to a lot of people, we decided to go running away from that activity. So something about breaking the federal law every day we just was not a good idea. You can't have a bank account. It just isn't a problem. I think it was a very good decision based on what was happening in the state as far as that's concerned. But what actually that then brought was some of the people that we were doing research in that is some of the doctors were saying, have you seen this new plant-based medicine where you grow tobacco plants and you genetically modify them and turn them into vaccines and antibodies? And I'm like, no, I've never heard of anything of that. And so they're saying, your equipment looks like it would be perfect to grow them. And so that's what we did. We started taking a look at molecular farming. And so growing plants. So now I'm going to differentiate this. Garden Fresh Farms, our customers do not want genetically modified anything. That's what they want. Whatever their religion is, that's what they want. So we're not going to violate that. On the other side, making pharmaceutical products out of genetically modified everything is okay. And so that's what we're doing, separate facilities. What we had an opportunity to do is at the beginning of 2015, the state opened up a new corporate entity called a public benefit corporation. And so there were, that first day of the year, there was the beginning class, there was 21 corporations that were formed as public benefit corporations, PBCs. We are a specific benefit corporation. And let me quickly explain what that is. And it is, we are a for-profit company, but we have a social benefit goals, and they are stated, and we report them to the Secretary of State every year when we file our taxes at that same time. And so somebody mentioned yesterday that we're Midwesterners, and so we don't really get up and crow about what we do. And I think there's a lot of businesses that do a lot of social good. I've been hearing about the rendering plant here, and I was thinking about some of the employees that we've had that were new Americans. It was the first time they ever had a health care insurance. First time one of my employees ever saw a dentist. So I'm sure that's going on right here at this rendering plant. So businesses do a lot of social good, but they never really get a chance to crow about. In this case, we have to. We're mandated by law that we have to say what we're doing as part of that. So what we're doing is we're advancing plant-based medicine to significantly meet public health challenges. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that here. So what we're doing is we're making proteins, antibodies, vaccines, and you can see there we're doing an injection into a plant. And I'm going to go through a little bit more. Some of the things that we can do, we can to speed things up. We're trying to, we can make products faster, so it can get through research a little faster, they can get through the clinical studies a little bit faster, and more safely, because plants don't have some of the problems that you have that happen with other vaccines that are made out of, say, E. coli or other animal products. So we're not a vaccine distributor or anything like. We are a contract manufacturer. So we will make proteins and vaccines for, so there's, I think, 3 or 4 distributors here in town. we would make vaccines and things for those companies to distribute. We are getting ahead of myself, but we're working with Mayo Clinic on some cancer drugs as well. Anyway, it seems to be that a lot of big pharmaceutical companies are going towards making medicines out of biologics. And the reason is it's saving some time and money. And I'll get into this next slide here. A lot of vaccines are made with eggs, and when you make them, you wonder about the flu vaccine. Every March they decide what we're going to get sick with next year. And so then they start making that vaccine because it takes 6 months to grow them up and get enough supply. And so I think even with some of the vaccines, was it the one with swine that was, 3 years ago, killed about 10 million dogs? That vaccine, when it came out, was only like 60% effective. Because by the time you get to production, things have mutated enough. And so what we have done is with plants, it's a totally different thing. And I explained this last night that I get in trouble for explaining it this way because this is how somebody who isn't a scientist would explain it. Okay, so that's me. If I have a cold and I sneeze all over you, and now you got this, you're probably going to be sneezing tomorrow, and you're going to feel like heck for about a week, and then your body will build up enough antibodies and start to combat it and all that. It takes about a week to do that. Something like that. Basically, this is what we're doing to a plant. And again, this is very non-scientific the way I'm explaining it to you. So those PhDs in the room, sorry, you can beat me up later. But what we're doing is we're taking the combination of a lot of things, indoor growing, cell genetics, and being able to, the gene splicing that has really changed in the last 3 years. And so what we can do is change and put into slice a particular part in the DNA code, and then what we're doing is we're infecting the plant. We're basically like sneezing on it, making the plant then absorb this, and actually now it's fighting it. Now it's starting to grow this thing that we just told it to grow. And it's doing it in basically 6 days, because by the 6th day, the plant's starting to win, and it starts fighting back. So what we do is we've got a limited window. So we're growing a plant, we're making it sick, you could say, it's growing all these antibodies for it, and before it can win, what we're doing is we're taking it, basically squishing it. And if you think about it, it's kind of like mining for gold. You put in a lot of material, and you get out a little bit of gold that's very worthwhile. And so that's what we're doing. We're using the production power of plants. So we're growing the plants. We can grow plants all week long, so they're up to about 6-week-old plant. And on that, say the next Monday, we say we're going to be growing this. And so now we tell the plant what it is that it's going to become. And so that's what we're doing. Just some of the things I probably have gotten into, some of being able to scale the production with plants. We can do this again looking at the Garden Fresh Farms model. There is a company that did successfully make the Ebola virus vaccine. And so that was actually made with a tobacco plant. Now, because of the FDA approvals and all that, it takes forever. So what happens is they made it here, shipped it to West Africa, and those relief workers were saved. They're growing in a 90,000 square foot greenhouse. What we can do is in 6,000 square feet greenhouse, we can grow the same number of plants. And so it's a lot more efficient. And also, if you think about it, you're going to try to biosterilize 90,000 square feet versus 6,000 square feet. We were talking about, was it Jeff yesterday, talking about trying to sterilize some turkey barns. You can imagine what doing a 90,000 greenhouse would be. So anyway, this is, I'm not going to get into the whole process, but just take a look at the picture here that's on your right. And so if you take a look at that, this is a genetic alter. What's happened on these plants is it was put on to make a protein that actually had a fluorescent marker in it. And so that way we could tell that we could actually express that particular protein that we were looking to do. And so you can see that the dots on there is how the plant did that. So there are several different types of plants. There's tobacco, There is rice, there's mustard. Last night I was talking to the two veterinarians that were here talking about turkey issues. They were also talking about how difficult it is to vaccinate a turkey, and you have to do that several times. One of the things that we're looking at is that since it's a plant material, can we grow that as a plant material and very cost effectively transforming that plant material into an edible product so that it could be, and I'm going to simplify this and say it's like salt and pepper, and now it gets added into the feed, in particular turkey feed, and maybe you feed the turkeys once a week for a period of time, and if it's the right mix, if it's a nanobody that can survive the acid in the stomach and things like that, these are all things that are very probable of being able to happen. The other thing too is that you mentioned about this long window. Well, we have certain things that happen. This turkey flu, we knew it was coming from what I heard last night, but we were caught flat-footed on it. Ebola is a 100-year-old disease. We were caught flat-footed on it. What's next? You know, we're talking about Zika. You know, that's been around for a while. You know, is that coming this way? These are all things, and if you've got to wait 6 months for a vaccine to happen, once you figure out how to combat it, there's a lot of people that are going to be ill or die. And so really the ability of growing plants and having them at a point in time, you want to call it a fail-safe point, they're growing and growing, and then at a certain point in time we say, you know what, we're not going to be growing this vaccine for this. This has a higher public health risk issue, and we're going to switch to converting all these plants into that. Now you've got something where you could be very quick reaction time to be able to fight health problems. So this is the other exciting part of it too, and this is why the Mayo Clinic is really excited about doing this with us. If, heaven forbid, anybody here gets cancer, and we all have had a friend or loved one who has and family member. If I get cancer, my cancer is going to be different than any of yours because it is something that went haywire in my DNA. And so what you need to do is you need to stop it, you need to encapsulate, you got to keep it from growing, you need to get, the cancer wants to get out there and get all the blood vessels and get going, you want to stop the cancer from doing that. But if you try to do that, one pill cures all. I think there's about 7 or 8 pills. One of my partners in Garden Fresh Farms, his wife passed away about a year ago. She was on cancer medication. The first one that she took was, I think, about $25,000 a week, and that one almost killed her. So they took her off that, 2 days, threw those pills away, and was on something else that she lived for about another 6 months. But what I'm saying is when you're trying to do this on the masses, it's very difficult. You're in chemotherapy, you're killing all cells. This is the problem with cancer. What we're looking at is that if you take a biopsy, you take the actual cancer cells and you say, what went wrong here? And what you're doing is you're basically in the labs growing the antidote, growing something that's going to stick to the sticky parts of the what went haywire here. And so what we do then is make the opposite of that, so it's a plus and a minus, and we grow that in the plant, turn around, and then give that to the patient. So each individual batch is actually made for that person. And that's why when you see in the back and you look at our drums, we can have rooms of these growing plants, as we do for food. We can do this for medicine, but then have a room that just has one of these drums in it that's making plant for you or whoever. And so that's where we're going with that. So it can be, then you've got a room that can be a small room that can be sterilized down after the end of that. So done some great partnerships. Minnesota Cup has been kind to us, and we've had some great mentors along the way. We've been working with, University of California is something for actually it's non-medical, it's a Department of Defense type of item. AURI, we're putting in touch with researchers. Actually, about a year ago, or 2 years, we were looking at, with a beta. We grow basil. They use a lot of basil oil in skin creams and things like that. You know, the idea of being able to grow basil right next to your factory so that you're not worried about your supply chain type of thing. So these are these type of partnerships and things that we can move forward with. U of M, we would like to have some great technology that they're out there. They have the office on DC, and we're looking forward to licensing some of the product that's coming out of there and being able to produce that. One of them is in the swine area, and we're just starting discussions again on that one to see if we can grow something there. So anyway, a lot of different great partners. That's great. There's a great partner there. Jeff is a co-founder in Wind Farm with me, and I'll just we have some other mentors and board members that are much smarter than we are. You can see Jeff and I are bring the business development and maybe the entrepreneurial skills to it, and we're smart enough to know that we're dumb enough that we need to hire smarter people than we are. So anyway, we are through the proof of concept. We are now starting to scale up. We're talking to different investors about doing that, being able to change the Maplewood facility into a wind farm growing facility, and then after that will be a processing facility. So we would do that. That's this facility in Maplewood. Eventually, we see us having one in Rochester because it would be next to the Mayo Clinic. Somebody's very sick, they fly in, they get diagnosed, they get a biopsy, they stay in town for a week, and then hopefully get treated and go home. And so those would be things that would be important. If we're doing things with vaccines, animal vaccines, it's possible that would be just that CO2 sequestering farm for Garden Fresh, that we could be doing something, a min farm out here, so we're growing a vaccine that we use for animals. And so I think I touched on a lot of these: personalized cancer treatment, disaster, contract manufacturing. That's what we do, and just the idea of being able to get research materials through a little bit quicker. And just some of the competitive advantages, and the one is just the speed is the first one, and I think the cost reduction is on that, and the fact that we can make it personalized, so you're not wasting all of this on patients that it's not going to be useful for. You can make something specific. And of course the CO2 sequestering partnerships, we see that as being a big growth area for us as well. And I think that's it. So did I make it on time?
Would you like to have a company like this in town? It'd be great. Wonderful. Good presentation. Thank you very much. We're going to leave a little bit of time for questions and answers, but we're running short on time here. What I would suggest we do, depending on how Jeff, our next presenter, goes with this presentation, maybe bring you all back for a few questions and answers. Otherwise, if we run out of time, I would ask all of you who are interested in talking to David or to Shannon to reach out to them. In the meantime, the kids are prepping on the other side. They're going to join us later on for the 4-H presentation, and I encourage you to engage them as well. They're very polite, very nice, so talk to them. Our next presentation talks about a very, very relevant issue, that is water quality and water resource, water policy. Jeff Peterson is the Director of Water Resource Center at the University of Minnesota. And he is going to share his insights. Because obviously, water is very, very important in Southwest Minnesota, both in terms of supply and quality. But we will have Jeff explain. Let's give him all a hand. Welcome, Jeff Peterson.